Okay, everybody, dashboard, here we go. A couple of things, it's very interesting. One of the questions we ask this group, and I also ask every few years when I do a bigger deduction survey, how would you rate your reporting capabilities, your deduction reporting capabilities? And this is pretty consistent with what I see, where there typically are fairly few people who say their reporting that they get is excellent. Most are average. And when we ask about, do you have a dashboard? Here I see that they asked the group and a number of you said, yes, you have it, but it takes a lot of effort. Others say, no, you don't. One of the issues that I see when I work with organizations is that they feel they have a dashboard or they feel they have reporting, but often for management, it's not working for management. Like they don't get the information or it's multiple pages. And I've found that senior management frequently, after they look at the first few lines of something, they move on to something else. So if it's not hitting them right in the face with what you want them to do and what the issues are, it's something that they often don't see, which I think is why when we get to the dashboard that we're going to be completing, it's very rudimentary. I think it's very, very basic, but it's amazing to me when I work with my clients and present it to senior management to just show them the kinds of things that can get done. They almost across the board love it. And it's really basic, but I think it's something that is often very helpful and it can show people where to focus. The last question that we kind of asked is, how good do you feel your pivot skills are? Your Excel pivot skills, pivot tables, and good. Most of you have said that you feel pretty comfortable, and we'll see, because we're going to be doing a little bit of pivot table work. So tomorrow we'll probably not advanced pivot table, pretty basic. And tomorrow you'll be using pivot tables to gather information to fill in some of the dashboard. So we'll probably break into small groups for part of tomorrow. So I'll make sure that whoever does not feel so comfortable with pivot tables, you can send me a chat privately and let me know if you want, and I'll make sure that those of you who may not be so comfortable are spread out in groups with people who are more comfortable. Here's what we're going to do. Here's an overview of the next 2 days. So today we're going to focus on just understanding a little bit of the background of a dashboard template, why I think it's important, what things you should do when you're creating your own template. Then we'll walk through a sample template. I'll show you what we're going to be creating. Then we'll look at the data, the sample data that we've prepared for us to use to create the dashboard, or we're adding a month to the dashboard. And then at the end of today's session, we're going to create your pivot tables in your file so that you'll have them for tomorrow. And that'll be what we'll do today. Then tomorrow, we're going to populate the dashboard. That will take the majority of tomorrow's session. And once we do that, then we'll look at some other dashboard components before we wrap up. And really, while I think the dashboard is very straightforward, what I've realized over the years is it is straightforward and it's not difficult, but initially it can be a little confusing as to where the data is coming from and how it all ties together. And so that's why we created this workshop to go through it, to add a new month of data. So at the end, you will have done it for a month and you will see how to do it. So you'll be able to take something like this and create it within your own organization. Questions, anybody? If you have any questions at all, feel free to either, I don't know if you unmute yourself and ask it or put it in the chat or anything. So no question is silly. They are all welcome. Okay, so let's see. Right, so that's today. So let's talk first about why a dashboard. What are the reasons that dashboards are important? And I really feel one of the things that's so obvious but not obvious about deductions is it's a company-wide effort. People in the finance area are often the ones that are dealing with deductions and reporting on deductions, but I have not yet found a deduction that was caused by someone in the finance area. Yeah, right. But you're left to clean up everybody else's mess. So what I have heard, though, are people in other areas who are responsible, who are not aware that there are issues. Right, who are saying, well, I didn't know that there are like, if there are problems, let me know there are problems. And we don't want to play that game. So we want to make sure that kind of as people who are, let's say, the gatekeepers for those deductions, that you're providing information that pretty clearly shows what's going on, that other people can then start to ask questions. Senior management is really needed to promote this cooperation and accountability across different departments. I mean, there are a lot of organizations where cross-departmental cooperation is really challenging. Like whenever I do general big surveys and I ask companies what's their biggest internal challenge to try to overcome deductions, is it senior management buy-in, access to information, inefficient processes, cross-departmental cooperation? The number one for the last 30 years is cross-departmental cooperation. It's getting different groups to work together, because you tell another group something and they look at you and say, who made you my boss? So it's really, how do we have this information available so people can see it and you don't have to do that? And senior management, I also have found that they don't always understand that there is a large portion of controlling deductions that is under your control. So not all deductions are the cost of doing business. There's a large portion that are trade related, and you're going to have them always, and you want to process them quickly. But there's also some compliance related that are operational related, where you're shooting yourselves in the foot. And what I have found is senior management has often come up through the kind of the sales ranks or marketing ranks, and they are often not aware that there are some deductions that are self-inflicted or controllable. They think they're all either a profit center for the retailer or the cost of doing business. So showing senior management very clearly that either there are things that can be controlled or things that have been there for a long time that someone needs to be accountable can really help. And if it's all on one page and they understand how to read it, then it can be very helpful. So a 1 to 2 page dashboard can give senior management sort of that visibility. And I think that's why when I've worked with companies and show the dashboard, they get really excited. Okay. And this dashboard, again, it doesn't have all of the information in it, but it gives you a starting point. So a springboard to ask questions. One of the things that I like the best is after a couple of months of working with companies on the dashboard, invariably senior management asks the next question. Why is it taking so long for this to get resolved? Show me that breakdown by customer. And that's what you want. You want them to ask more questions to get to the root cause of a lot of the issues. So one of the first things that you have to do when you are creating a dashboard is you want to define the information that you have available. So you don't want to go out and create an amazing dashboard with data that you have to manually prepare all the time. You really want to minimize the manual effort. So you want to look at what data is available, what's available from my system, and you want to think about what reports do you have from existing reports? When you have reports, are there filters that you can use? Do you have a different selection criteria? Are you able to run the report a different way? Look at screen views that you have, or available online data queries that you can do. What other sources of information can you look at to get the information? Can you extract data? So you want to look at what's available and some things to think about. I sort of put together what I call this little availability checklist, but you can have more. Things that I like to look at that I think are really important are, first of all, looking at the total deductions received. And I like to look at both the dollars of deductions as well as the count. Right? Because I want to know what's a lot of dollars, but it almost takes the same effort, whether it's a $500 deduction or $5,000. It's the same work often. So I like to know the count, the number of transactions. And I like to look at these based on the total. I'd love to know it by customer. I'd love to know it by reason code. And I also want to know for the open things, the age. So this little checklist, you can go through in your organization as you're thinking about the data that you have and see what's available. The next thing after the total deductions that are received is what's open. So at any point in time, usually right at month end, and most people are very good at tracking what's open and by customer and by reason, the total. But often the first one, this deduction received, sometimes companies don't think of tracking that. They're very excited to show the open deductions, but they forget that really it's what you've received that's important. What's open just shows what you haven't cleared. I could give you a great open report because I would just write everything off. So, that looks great. And that's often finance. That's the first thing they give me when I come in. They show me their open deductions. I'm like, yeah, great. Show me the total received. Oh, look at that. So then, I also want to be able to track what's written off, if I can, what's credited, and what's recovered. Often, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, people can often tell what's closed versus what's open, but sometimes the method in which it was closed is a little bit harder to tell. Was it credited or written off or recovered? And that's been a challenge for a lot of companies. It's okay. Use something you can work towards, and you can figure out how can you start tracking. You just want to start with something to show some information. I want to be able to look at individual deductions sorted by dollar. Some companies, it's also very helpful to be able to track the status of a deduction. So we'll look at that, but by status, I mean not just open or closed, but where is it in its life cycle? So for example, it's new, no one's looked at it. It's being researched, waiting for the customer to give me information, waiting for sales or an internal department. It's been disputed, so I'm waiting for the customer again. So it's nice to show me where things are so that I can tell if there's a bottleneck or something. If that's something that you currently track, that's great. If it's not something you currently track, and whatever system you're using to manage deductions has the ability to track that or has a field that's not being used, you may want to think about that. If you're doing your tracking, not just your reporting, but if you're even tracking deductions in Excel, much easier. I mean, that's definitely not best practice. However, it's pretty easy to add a status field to start using, and even have a drop down so that people don't type it in. They can select from a status that you predefine. Also, it's helpful if you are able to tell whether a deduction is valid or invalid. Then whether and we'll look at this, whether the responsible department. So when I look at deductions and I look at reason codes, I like to assign a responsible department to each reason code. And it doesn't have to mean, it's their fault. You can couch it in such a way saying, this is the group that's responsible for validating it potentially or clearing it, or they may have insight into why some of these happen, but really they are the ones who are most involved with that reason. And probably if there's an issue or someone needs to talk to someone about what's going on, they're good ones. And then sales volume by customer, that's also something that I find helpful. And you'll see all of these fit together when we look at the dashboard, which we will shortly. You'll see the information and how we all use it. And it's pretty basic information, the things here. And then once we have that information, and you have identified the data that you feel is valuable, the next thing that's really important is making sure that you are reporting on things that management thinks is really important. Right. So, I mean, yes, you want it to be important, but it's more, if we're giving it to management, we want it to hit their hot buttons. And so for each of the things that you look at that's available, I think it's really good to identify what's really important to them. Like for some of my clients, it's all about recovery right now. So they really, really want to know what they're tracking. For others, it's no, I need to keep the age down. Others, I want to know what's happening with this reason code or this customer. So knowing what you have, knowing what their priorities are is helpful. And sometimes, even if you don't know, you just start with something and then you find they start asking. Once they understand the dashboard, and they start looking and asking for more information. One of my clients recently, for example, they just decided they love the dashboard and they want to add some year-over-year information so that they can really track their own improvement. So I think that's great. When you have that information, typically I'd say 6 to 10 different components on a one-page dashboard. So if you use 2 pages, I often think that the first page is general information, and then the second page you may have some customer-specific information that you want to share. Here are some components. And most of these, I think, are components that we'll be looking at. So total deductions received, my open deduction balances. Oh, and by the way, this presentation, I'm sure you have it. And if you don't get it, or you can get it, if not, we'll send it out to you. So open deduction balances greater than a certain number of days, right? We've talked about credits, write-offs, recovery, deductions by responsible department, by reason code, by status. And you can see by looking at these components that I've identified here, it really touches on a lot of different things. Like, what's the most challenging customer? What's the worst reason code? What area should I focus on? What's the oldest? What customer do I have the biggest balance? So there's a lot of different information. And when you also put the dashboard together, you can use a combination of charts and tables and graphs. It really depends on the audience, depends on what is going to resonate with your organization. When we look at the components, again, I want you to think about deductions in 2 different buckets, if you will. The first is this sales and fulfillment processes. So the things like, how well are we abiding by our trade agreements? So our trade spend and our return policies. These are deductions that we might get, that we expect to get. But then I have these compliance manuals that I'm supposed to be following, and I might get packing or labeling or routing guides. So these types of things, this results in the total deductions received. So the volume of deductions that I receive are a reflection of these things that you see over on the right-hand side. Yet on the other hand, my deduction management processes, my internal processes in terms of how good am I at identifying deductions or researching or recovering or reporting or preventing them, those are all reflected based on what I have that's open, that I'm working on. And then how can I take that information to try to prevent deductions from coming in again? So the one on the right, it's sort of outward facing, the way I look at it. Total deductions received is how well am I following the rules, the various rules that either I have agreed to or my clients or my customers are imposing on me. And the other side, the open, is how well am I resolving those deductions that I received? And they're very different questions, I think, and you want to show both of the information. Okay, so very hard to read, don't worry, but this is like the one-page dashboard. We're now going to go through each component, so don't worry about it. What I want to show you, you're going to have, when you print it out, it's still a lot of information on a page, but it's great information to go through. So we're going to look at each section. So what you find here on the top left-hand side is here's a chart view of showing you monthly deduction information. the new deductions that have come in that blue line, what's been closed in the fuchsia line, what's open in the red, and then the turquoise shows what's over 90 days. So very quickly over time, I mean, you will know most of this because if you're working in it day to day, you're aware of it. But for management to be able to look at this, some people could look at, like, you could look at this quickly and say, oh, you know what? I'm moving open deductions in the right direction. They're coming down. I'm happy about that. Have a teeny uptick in my over 90 days. I really want to get that down. But you can see that very quickly as opposed to going through pages and pages of information or trying to figure it out yourself. So that's the first piece. Then over to the right, this is now the source data that feeds those charts. So the first two columns show for this month, what are the total new deductions that have come in? So for example, in May of 21, in this example, $861,156 of new deductions have come in, 543 deductions. And so you can sum that for the total year to date. You can see what you have year to date. And then on the right-hand side, at month end, then that information comes from at the end of the month, what I have, my open deductions. So on the right comes from my year to date, and on the left is my year to date, and on the right is my open deductions, where I'm looking at the total dollars that are open, the count of what's open, what's over 90 days old, and then the percent that's over 90 days old. So again, very simple information, but very powerful to look at what's happening over time and what can I do about it. The whole rest of this dashboard that we're going to look at takes the same information, except for the benchmarks, takes the same information, what's open and closed, and just slices and dices it differently. So I'll show you what I mean. Oh, also, for many companies, they are unable to differentiate between what's credited and written off versus repaid. And so you just are able to show a total closed, which is better than nothing. If you're able to even show closed, but then have, let's say, a breakout of top recoveries, that's fine. For many of my clients, this closed ends up being a plug. You know, it ends up being, because it is, if I start with my open balance from the prior month and I add to it my new deductions and I take away what's open at the end of the current month, what the difference is what I cleared. Right? It's just like inventory, right? If I start with 5 marbles at the end of April, and I add 5 marbles, so now I have 10 marbles, but I end with 3 marbles I gave away or I closed 7. So it's just an inventory calculation. So again, if you're able to break out repaid, that's great. If it's something that's really a focus of the organization and you can, great. Otherwise, it's great to have something and then let management tell you what they're most interested in and what they want to focus on. This next chart that I have over here, which we'll talk about more tomorrow, is sometimes organizations want to pick a few benchmarks. So I want to look at maybe deductions as a percentage of AR, or open deductions over 90 days, or my days deductions outstanding. And I want to look at what is the industry median and maybe our target, and then where are we, to know what can I improve on. And in terms of benchmark information, if you're ever looking for benchmark information, I'm happy to share information with you. Every 3 years, Attain Consulting does a big deduction survey. It used to be done by the Credit Research Foundation, and for the last 6 years, we've been doing it. And the 2021 survey is actually at the proofreader or whoever that person is. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll have the PDF of the results. So You can get a lot of industry benchmarks and even see what different organizations are doing by company size and by industry. Okay, then the next section, now we look at, let's say, top reasons. So we look at some top reason codes, and you can decide how you group your reasons. If you have a ton of reasons, I definitely encourage you to narrow them down or group them together, because once you have more than 8 or 9 on a list to look at, it becomes overwhelming and no one's really paying attention. And you want to focus people to be able to look at what is the reason. I like to include who's responsible. So for me, for example, everything that I would consider a trade related deduction, like co-op or advertising or allowances or discounts, pricing, often rebates, those are frequently sales related. I think sales, they're pre-budgeted, pre-approved, so they would be responsible. Shortages are often the DC or the warehouse. And again, I'm not saying who has to be responsible, and often you may want to negotiate internally to figure it out, but it's a really good opportunity to, by reason, come up with an area that's responsible, and then be able to tell them, and be able to, as you're tracking information, you'll be able to show that information and be able to share with them. And then you'll look at by reason code again. Now you've broken it out a little bit more. And now I'm looking at, here are the total dollars in deductions that I've gotten year to date. And now here's what's open at the end of the month. And here, if you want, here's what was open the prior month. So you can see whether it's gone up or down. Here's what's over 90 days and the percent that's over 90 days. I think 90 days, and you can use whatever day you want, whatever number of days, but to me, 90 days has always been a really good kind of measure of how people are doing. And that's something that most companies like to look at 90 days, and they want things to really try to be cleared within 90 days, or at least keep track of what's over 90 days old. Questions, thoughts? Does it, I mean, I know it's basic, but does it make sense? Hopefully.
Yes, it's great. Thank you.
Feel free. I mean, and if it doesn't, that's fine. I don't think it's very confusing. Wait till you start populating it. Then what makes a lot of sense will suddenly be very confusing. I don't know. People really seem to like it, resonates. So trust me, this is a good thing to try to do if you don't have something like this. No, you don't have to
Jessica,
trust me. I just say that. Yep.
I have a question. Going back to the reason codes. Mm-hmm. Right. Our system that we currently use right now, right? We have no way of pulling reason codes, because whenever our department posts the deduction, there's no way of them identifying what those deductions are or putting them into buckets. So we use the AS400, which is very, very old. So I just don't know how we can put these into the buckets that you have here, the reason codes that you have here.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Do you have a field? Do you have a field in the AS400 now that if you knew a reason code that you have
Yes.
a field for reason code?
Yes.
Okay. And so are you telling me that a cash application based on your customers, your key customers' claim numbers, you don't know what they are? Do you do business with Sobeys or Loblaws?
Everything's manual. Everything's
That's
manual.
okay. I don't care if it's manual, but when I get a deduction, if I'm doing business with Amazon and I get a deduction and it's blah, 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 SC, that's a shortage. And so if I give my cash applicators a cheat sheet, if you will, of here's how to identify it, maybe they can do a better job, potentially.
Okay.
There are some customers that it's very hard, but there are a lot of customers that based on the claim number that they provide during Cash App, on their remittance, you can tell what the reason code is.
Okay.
That's one thing. Yeah. Second of all, if you're saying that people don't have it, and then let's say it's in the S400, but then people export the data because they're doing their research, let's say in Excel, then I would say, maybe when they're doing their research and they identify it, now I could allow them to add a reason code. And then the next month, or whenever I'm downloading the next information, I could do a VLOOKUP to transfer those reason codes over to the new sheet.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. I mean, one last idea is then I'm going to go and I'm only going to look at the highest dollar, because I could probably go to, take 20% of the deductions that are open and get a large percentage of the total dollars. So I'm going to do something to try to get some information, because you're right. If I don't have any reason code information, it's a little bit more difficult for me to know what improvement opportunities do I have.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing too with the S400, any reporting that we want to pull from the S400, IT have to build that report first.
Right. But you could do a data dump. Forget a report, just give me a dump of the data, possibly.
Okay.
And again, if you want to talk offline, after, I'm happy to talk about it. As you can tell, I don't take no for, no, we're going to find a way. We got to find a way.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica.
Good to be creative. Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, so even though I've looked at it now by reason codes, as we talked about, and now I'm summarizing it by responsible department. So I look at it by responsible department. And so if I'm senior management, for example, I might look at this and, okay, sales, we do a lot of trade agreements. I expect that. And, suddenly I'm like, wait, the warehouse, they're responsible for shortages. Why do I have so many shortages? Or why are, 80% of my open deductions are over 90 days old? What's the problem? Did I do it or not? Or even if I look at the trade, for me, over time, senior management's going to start saying, wait a minute, I either gave them that program a lot or I didn't. Why do I have so much over 90 days? What's the challenge clearing it? And meanwhile, you're there just sitting there smiling because, you have the same question. Why is it taking so long? So that's what can sometimes happen. Then the next piece that I often look at are top deductions received this month. So I just try to show management that on this past month, I just sort based on the total the deduction dollars. And these are individual deductions, the top 10 individual deductions, so that you can see who took what and what it was for. And that's it. And sometimes you see the same customer, Amazon. If you do business with Amazon, you frequently see Amazon. So that you can look and see. And sometimes companies say, you know what, you don't have to include trade. Yes, I want to see in general, but we know we have these trade agreements. I want to focus on shortages, or I want to focus on compliance, or break them out so that I'm looking at them separately. So again, different companies take the same kind of data source and may do different things with them. All right. So now what I might look at, this is an organization where we're able to track the status, right? So I might say, this is, I have a status that says new. So that means no one's touched it yet. And then people are researching. And then the responsible department is validating it. We've determined it's valid, or it's invalid, or it's waiting for approval. You may have your own different status codes. You may not have any. You may think about putting them in high-level buckets, just because it's interesting. If I look at this here, for example, if I see that I don't even remember the total that I have open, maybe I need a total, but out of what I have open, I have $1 million in the responsible department validating. Why is it taking so long? Plus, I have $1.2 million in approval. So again, to me, this indicates that I'm waiting for people outside of finance to approve it or to tell me if it's valid. So if I'm senior management right now and I get this, I'm going to get people to move and be a little more accountable for things that are happening. If I don't have something like this, then there's absolutely no visibility and they don't know what could be tying things up. They just know that there's a big deduction amount and people are often blaming the finance area. But really, you can see we're waiting. We're doing our best. We need a little help. I then like to look at the top 10 open deduction balances. So these customers have the largest open balance and the percent of those that are over 90 days old. And then I try to show a little bit about the key reason codes. So for this one, for Kroger, the most were discounts and shortages. For Walmart, it was allowances and pricing. I don't know how Amazon is so low, but I think I changed all the names anyway. Moved them around, so protected the innocent. These are pretty low anyway. So again, it's nice to know, like in this particular organization, I may have a lot of customers that I'm doing business with, but my top 10 are 96% of my open deductions. Right. So often people become so overwhelmed with trying to manage deductions that it's hard to know where to start and what to do first. Often when you start looking at a dashboard, it really gives you some clarity as to what customer should I focus on, in what area, and or what reason is the biggest reason that I have. Right. So often companies come to me, let's say, and they are very concerned about a customer. They have a lot of shortage deductions and they feel that they're probably invalid, but what should they do about these shortage deductions for these customers? And so I ask, are the shortage deductions, do you get them just from a few customers or do you get them from a lot of different customers? They're like, oh, we get them from everyone. I'm like, well, then maybe you need to turn around and look inside a little bit first. If you get them across the board, there's a better chance that there are at least some things you're doing on your end that are contributing to these. On the other hand, if there are only a couple of customers that you're getting these shortages from, then maybe it's on them. Maybe it's a little more on them and you can look at it. So there are different things that you can look at. You may add a component where, if shortages are a problem for your organization, you may look at the top 5 shortage customers, and then see if the top 5 doesn't really cover that big a percent of the total shortage, well, then it's a broader issue. But if the top 5 or the top 2 or 3 customers are the bulk, well, then you can really have a targeted improvement approach on those. And I think the last thing on this dashboard that I'm going to show is I then like to look at total deductions that I've gotten for that customer as a percent of sales. So while we looked at the open balance, now what I like to do is I sort of take my top deduction customers, deductions that I've received, and I look at sales and I try to I then break the deductions into a group. Like what are my trade related and then what are my non-trade related and then the total. And try to say here, this is, I definitely made this up, but, Amazon, was 21% of sales. It's probably not so unusual for some companies, right? And so again, for management to see something like this, there are a lot of companies that don't really do a comprehensive profitability by customer. So calling out any of these, even if it's not correct to start out, just to get management to go, wait, what? What is this? And one of the things that's interesting, when I look at sales, I often try to lag sales. So for example, when I get a deduction this month, what month are we? We're in June. When I get a deduction in June, it's not June sales. It's probably sales from, March or April, right? I get what I shipped and billed in April, depending on your terms, I may get my deduction in June. right? If I have 60-day terms, if they're taking it on when they're paying me, that's when they're taking the deduction. They're paying that invoice, but the sales were from 2 months ago. So you may lag your sales a little bit so that you align them up a little bit. Different companies do different things. Okay. Questions? Anyone? Makes sense? Yes.
Jessica, I have a question. Can you elaborate more on the non-trade deduction portion? Because I got the trade deduction was defined earlier. Can you give examples?
Yes. So let me go back to my recent codes. So the way I would look at it is co-op is a trade deduction, right? Because it's sales related. Shortage, it's non-trade. Because it's not sales related. So it's a non-trade deduction. Allowances, trade. Unidentified, it's not trade related. Discount, it's trade. Compliance is not trade. Pricing, it can be whatever, it depends. I go back and forth because often what I find pricing, when you dive into it, you find out that the salesperson promised a certain price discount and they forgot to put it in the system. So it is kind of trade. But sometimes you can have pricing where you change the price and the customer didn't update it in their system. And so, is that trade or not? I don't know.
Now, Jessica, what's been the feedback? Like, why do we need to sort it out that way because right now we don't. We have the reason codes, but how is that beneficial?
I'll tell you why, and a very good question. I usually try to put deductions in 3 buckets. One is I call intentional or trade. So they're sales-related deductions. They're pre-approved, pre-budgeted, hopefully. They are the cost of doing business. You're not going to reduce them. The only way you're going to reduce them, but it's not really, is if you say to someone, I'm going to give you a 2% allowance, and instead of sending me a deduction for that 2% on your $100 invoice, I'm only going to invoice you $98, so I'm giving it to you off invoice. You know what I mean? So then you won't get that deduction. But that's the same thing as saying to someone, I'm going to give you a 2% allowance. I'm sending you the invoice for $100, but only pay me $98. And then that $2 is a deduction, and it's a trade deduction, and it's the cost of doing business. And what you want to do with that group, we're getting a little off topic, but that's okay, hopefully. What you want to do with that group of trade is you want to make sure that they are documented and pre-budgeted, and you want to process those as quickly as possible. Because usually 98% of those are valid, and it's not a good use of your time to spend time because they're valid. However, they're big dollar amounts. So when they're invalid, when they took more than they should have, or they double deducted, or there wasn't a program, you want to find that. So those are the trades. So they're really the cost of doing business, I think. And depending on your industry, it could be 70 or 80% or more of your total deductions. The next group, which I call typically, let's say, compliance related or preventable. So these are things that, unlike the cost of doing business, this is the cost of doing business poorly, I think. So there are things like shortages, all your compliance violations like labeling and ticketing and pallets and early late delivery and prepping potentially and carton markings and all of the multiple shipments, consecutive day shipments and all of that kind of stuff, which are all of the rules that these customers tell you need to comply with. And if you don't do it, you're going to get charged for it. So in theory, the focus on those, unlike I want to resolve it quickly, the focus on those is how can I prevent those from happening? So how can I understand the root cause of those and then have the team, the responsible departments take corrective action to fix the problems that are causing those. So it's very different than trade. You know what I mean? Like the way to handle it is very different from trade, which is why you break it out. Trade, you're like, yep, I have these. If they're invalid, get them. I should be able to resolve them very quickly. They're either valid or invalid fast. This non-trade, this compliance that I call it, or preventable, that's, wait, why did that happen? If it's the customer's fault, get my money back. And if it's my fault, what can I do to fix it? Or did I make a business decision and they're okay? And then the last group, which doesn't fall into either of the other two groups easily, I often call like unauthorized. So that's like returns, stuff like that. Like you may have a return allowance, but you're going to get some returns in general that you may not have approved. You can't really prevent them, so they just sort of come in.
Okay.
Does that answer that? Sorry, it was a little long-winded.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
Anybody else? Questions? Okay. I said that may consider lagging. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to look at some of the sample data that you have. I'll show you what you have, then you'll kind of look at your files. I want to make sure, did everybody download the 2 files?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so you have 2 files. So I'm going to show you what you have. One file, I don't know what yours is called. Mine was called Deduction Data for May 2021 Dashboard. So it's the one that has multiple tabs. So it will have a bunch of different tabs that we're going to use to populate the dashboard for May 21. You have a reason, and I'm going to go through all of these as soon as I read the slide. I'm going to go through each one and explain what it is. And if you have 2 screens, you can look at your data as well. So I'm going to have, there's reason code mapping data. So that shows you how I organize the data and what you can look at. Then I have some.
Jessica.
Yeah, sure.
Can you share your document and point out what you're talking about?
Yes, I'm going to. Yes, I will do it. 1 sec. I'm gonna tell you. So I'm just gonna show this because then I'm gonna go and show you. But yes, I'll show you. You know what? Let me open that. I'll show you. Where is it? Is this it? Sorry, give me 1 second. Yep, here it is. So let me drag it over. So this is the file that I have in Excel should have 2, 3, 4, 5 tabs. You won't have these last 2 tabs. Okay? And so the tabs and the information that we're going to look at, and I'm going to go through with you, is this reason code mapping. And then we're going to look at the year-to-date data, the open deduction data, some historical information, and then sales data. And this is all of the information that you're going to use to populate the dashboard. The other file that you have, probably didn't open it, but I will. The other file is a template that we'll look at probably tomorrow. It's got all different colors on it. And that's what you're going to use to populate the dashboard. But let's look at the data first. So the first file that you have, right? It looks like this, your tab. And what I really want to just show you is what we have on there is, here are the reasons. I have allowance, defective allowance, a freight allowance, a new store allowance, a warehouse allowance. I have a co-op and discount. I have price protection, pricing, rebates. I have ASNs, carton issues, early late delivery, fill rate, freight, blah, blah, blah. A whole bunch of things. But what I did is I rolled them up. So my allowances, defective allowance, freight allowance, new store allowance, and warehouse allowance, I rolled up to allowance. So I have a type that's allowance. I still have an underlying detailed reason, but if I showed all of these on a dashboard, I would lose management. I would lose them. Better to show allowance and then have them ask, I need more information. So when we looked at it, and you can see, we talked about the different groupings, trade, I call this preventable. I had a separate one for returns. Whatever you do within your organization is fine. It's just nice to be able to roll up your reasons into some higher levels. It's helpful for management. And then I also assigned a responsible department for each one of my reasons. And I show you this for two reasons. One is, as we're doing the dashboard, you'll see where some of this comes from. And the second is to also give you an idea if within your own organization, you don't have things that are rolled up. It's something to consider, because it really is too overwhelming for management to look at more than like 8 or 9 things at once. I really have found when I go and look at reporting, and there's very granular reporting, which people who are fixing things might need. I go to management, and if I look at a report on deductions and it's sorted alphabetically, what's at the top? Like advertising, allowances. So they start, management says it's the cost of doing business. If I sort by dollar amount, what's at the top? Advertising, allowances still. So it's still the kind of this cost of doing business, and they don't see all of the things that really they could be fixing. So I try to find ways to point that out to show them, yes, this is our trade work, and here's what that's made of, and here are the dollars, but this is where we really can add value by preventing this dilution. This is true dilution to our company. So that's the reason code mapping. That's the reason code mapping. And I think I may have done some VLOOKUPs, on some of the other files, which is good if you don't have kind of roll-ups within your organization. You create a table with those roll-ups, and then you can use VLOOKUPs on your reporting. And if at some point someone changes and says, oh no, the responsible department for that is, the warehouse, not sales. Once you change it, then you can refresh all of your information. So that's the reason code mapping tab. The next tab, which I'll show you on the actual file, the year-to-date data, it's very small. Yours should look like this. Yeah? Yours kind of looks like that, and it's got 3,706 rows. So it's got a lot of rows. Yes, it took me many hours to cleanse and fix and move around, and it was lovely. So that's that data. And the information that you have, we have the month. I was not putting in individual days, forget that, but I made it easier. So you have the month, you have the customer, you have the reason code, the type, the category, the responsible department, and the amount. So what we're doing for a lot of for the dashboard is we're going to be using kind of the type. And what I did is I used the VLOOKUP from my reason code mapping to populate these fields. So if you look at your Excel, I think, you can see in the Excel, I used my VLOOKUP to my reason code so that I could populate these fields. If you do not know how to do VLOOKUP, you don't have to do it at all in what we're doing. But if you don't know how to use it and you ever want, just reach out to me. I'll show you. I have like a little cheat sheet about it. It's a super, super amazing tool. If you use Excel at all, VLOOKUP can save your life.
Yes, can you share it by the end or at the end?
And you know what I'll do? Maybe I will even, I think we'll have time. I will show, at the end of today, I'll show you, I'll show you VLOOKUP. It's super, super scary when you first look at it. And then once you figure it out, you're like, this is easy. It's very easy. But initially it's like, I don't even know what they're talking about, because it's like array and like all this stuff. It's like, I don't know what they mean. But it's really, I'll show you. Easy. Okay. Back to here. So that's that data. So that's the year-to-date data. So it's by month. It's everything from January through June, that the deductions that came in for this organization. And then I have the next tab, just similar, is open deductions. So these are just what is open at the end of what month? At the end of May. So it shows who the customer is, the date it was created, the reason code again, the type, category, responsible department, the status, and the amount that's open. So I'll show you. It looks like this. Very little also. Right? It looks like that. Okay. Then I provided some historical information. Why did I provide it? Yeah. So I gave you some historical information because maybe to calculate some of the benchmarks that we're going to be doing, you're going to need to have some of this information. And as you do this dashboard, even though you have it, right, you have it, but I wanted to provide you some additional information to show you like what it was at month end and deductions as a % of AR, and you'll be able to calculate some of the information. I also wanted to show you what was open at the end of the prior month, because on one of our tables, we say what was open prior month. So I gave you data to help you figure out some of the pieces of information. And then finally, there's sales data. So I gave you sales data because we're going to use that on the piece of the dashboard that shows deductions as a % of sales. So that's the data that you're going to use. And now what we're going to do, we're going to create pivot tables, and then we're definitely going to finish early, which is great, unless we have a flood of questions. But I will show you, I'll do some VLOOKUP for you. Or maybe we'll get into what we're going to do tomorrow as well. That's exciting too. Okay. Anybody, any questions based on the sample data? Everybody has that data? It looked reasonable? Okay. So pivot tables. So ours is not going to look like that. That's just a picture. So we're going to create 2 pivot tables. You're going to create a pivot table from the year-to-date data, and you're going to create a pivot table from the open data. So we're going to end up with a year-to-date pivot table and an open pivot table. Now, it's not going to look like that either. Do you want a pivot table refresher? Anyone? You feel good? Who's honest and says they want one?
Like so, yeah.
So I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to take very long. So you're going to create a year-to-date pivot table in your Excel file, and you're going to use the year-to-date data table. And you are going to include the following fields in your pivot table. So I'm telling you pretty much everything you need to do. So I'm going to show you how you're going to do that, or how I would do it anyway. I'm not like the biggest expert in the world, but I'll show you how I'm doing it. So I'm going to get my file. So here's my year-to-date data. All right. And I'm going to, you can probably put your cursor almost anywhere, but I like to put my cursor here. And I'm going to, can you see my screen? Is it big enough?
Yeah. Yes.
So insert a pivot table. So I insert a pivot table, and it's automatically giving me the range 3,730 and rows. It's perfectly fine. I want a new worksheet. So I just say, okay. And now it gives me my pivot table drop-down box. And over here, it tells me all of the columns of data that I had. And I said, I want you to take the deduction type into the row. So it automatically brings it in, summarizes them. And I want you to bring in responsible department. And I want you to bring in the customer name. And I want you to bring in, for whatever reason, I don't even know why, the reason code. Okay, so now you have a lot of data, but now, I don't know if you're comfortable or not, I'm gonna click on the top here, and I'm gonna collapse the, I don't wanna see everything right now. I only wanna see my highest row, which are my deduction types.
Can you show me again, how did you collapse it?
The way I collapsed it was open,
yeah,
and I went the level I wanted you to collapse it to, right here. And then up at the top, I have collapse and expand. Or you might just have a red minus and a green plus. Do you have that also? Or maybe,
mine is in French.
Yours is in French. So what does it say in French?
You're in the tab analyze.
I'm in the analyze tab.
Okay, that's where I am also. And then
You should see something that looks like it's in the active field maybe, and it says collapse or expand. Also, I'm thinking if you
okay, I got
right click, you can also see it.
Same one. Okay, so it's collapsed. Great, thanks.
Okay. So I'm going to collapse again, that. And then what I want to do is I want to bring in the amount. So I'm going to bring the amount into my value. And it's automatically summing it, which is great. I don't like the format. So there are a lot of different ways to do this. I'm going back to my little amount there. And I go to my value field settings because I want a sum is fine. I want to format it. I like currency, but I don't want decimal points. And so now I have beautiful dollars, but I also want to count. So what I often do is I take the same field, but now when I go and I select value field settings, I don't want it to sum, I want it to count. And so and it's a number, no decimal points, but I want a comma separator. And so now I have a count. And then the last piece, I have this information and I can even change this if I want to say count. And the last piece that I have is I want it by month. And so you bring month into the column. And now I have the dollars, January, February, March, April, May, and then the count. And if I want to see the dollar and the count of each month right next to each other, I go to my columns where month is, and I just drag it to the top over the value. And now it switches it. Okay, so try that. I'm sure some of you are probably done, but why don't you try that? See if you get that, and it should end up, I'll make mine a little bigger. It should look like this. So I'll leave this here on this screen so you can try it. And if you're having any problems, we'll help you.
How did you get the column to just say count instead of count?
I just put my cursor there and changed it.
Oh,
typed hello. Now it says hello, but I'll put it back at count.
Okay. Oh, that was easy. Okay.
this making sense for everyone? Anyone need a walkthrough from Jessica or making progress?
Anyone struggling? Are you guys done? I'll give you another minute or two. If you are struggling, we can help. You can share your screen and we'll walk you through. No, this is like a no judgment workshop. And really pivot tables, as you can see, I just dragged things around. Once you get a little comfortable, it really also is so easy and so powerful. And I wouldn't say I'm an expert pivot table person by any stretch, but I'm like a hacker, a pivot table hacker. And it's really, though, really helpful.
Yeah, I'd say this and VLOOKUP are literally the most life-changing aspects of Excel when credit and collections. I can't tell you the amount of hours and days that I wasted before I understood how to use these tools. And once I understood them, it was dramatic in the amount of quality data I could produce that I'd be at the office till 10 p.m. trying to, fill in little cell by cell by cell.
Yeah.
Because as you probably know, in pivot tables, if I have this pivot table, but responsible department is my next layer here's everything, but responsible department is my next layer underneath, I can put that on the top, and now everything is done by responsible department. And to me, it's also such a powerful tool. And you know what? I want to sort it by highest to lowest. So it just makes life so much easier. And now I want to look at, so you can see, I want to look at it by responsible department. No, now I want to look at it, by customer, the largest customer. Oops. And, not surprising, there's our friend, and look at it. So we'll be using this a lot tomorrow when we're filling in the various tabs. Anyone need more time, or are we good? I'm going to assume we're good.
Sounds like we're good.
Okay. And if we're not good, you can tell us afterwards and we'll help you. So again, it should look like this, which I think it did. So now I want you to create another pivot table, and I want you to use and when you go to your pivot table right now, the tab you created, maybe change the name. Why don't you, as long as you're there, it'll say sheet 1. Why don't you double click down there and then call it, year to date pivot. I'm going to delete mine because I already have it. So you can go to Open Deductions and create your pivot table. And the rows you want are type, responsible department, customer name, and status. I put the balance and did it as a sum and account, and then the create date. But I'm going to show you a trick. You may already know the trick, but still act surprised. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what happens. Mine will probably already work that way. But if you put in create date, chances are you're going to have a lot of dates across the top of your spreadsheet. Because here's January 5th, here's January 24th, here's February 2nd. There's a way in pivot tables to group dates without having to add another column. I used to do things like put my aging in here, or put over 90, yes, no, and then use that column. But you can do it. I'm going to show you. I think mine will already be done because I've grouped it, but let's see. What did I say? Type and create date. Yeah, it's already done. All right, so I'll undo it and then I'll show you. Balance. So what you can do, if you, let's see if I can undo mine. Ungroup. 3/1/21. Okay, so you may look like this. When you do your pivot table, it might look like this. Anybody start one yet?
Yes.
Oh, yours might already be grouped because I grouped it before I sent the file out, but I'm not sure. Does yours look like this with a lot of dates, or is it already?
It has all the dates. Like
perfect. So if the pivot table knows that this is a date, if you put your cursor on the date and you right click, there are other ways to do it, but because you can use like group field and you see this little thing that looks like a date, I like to do it this way. Oops, I don't know what I like to do. I'm gonna right click. I think I'm gonna right click and I say group. It tells you, how do you want to group the data? Can you see this? Do you want to group it by minutes, hours, days, months, quarters, years, or when do you want to start it? So for us, we really care about things. This is for the June data, or so the end of May data. So 90 days is March, April, May. Right, is the beginning of March. So I really want you to just start it at March 1st and end wherever it is. And then I'm going to say by, let's say initially I'm going to have years and months. So now what it will do is it tells me, here's everything before March 1st, and here's everything April, May, June of 2021. So it grouped it for me. But since I don't really care about the months, I'm going to ungroup the months and just have the year. And so now I'm going to format it also, because I can't stand it when it's not formatted. Okay, feel better.
That's a great trick for sure.
Yeah. If it doesn't work, if it says you can't group it, that means that it doesn't, it's not a date, formatted as a date field in your data. So if you go and make it a date, then it will work, and then refresh it, it'll work. But that's a huge savings. And for us, we really care about we care about the total, and we care about what's over 90 days old. That's what we care about. And this is over 90 days old. So see if you can create that pivot table. With the other fields. So it should look like that. And I definitely, even if you know how to do pivot tables, I definitely recommend you do this, because you're going to use your pivot tables tomorrow to populate the dashboard. So I'm going to give you a few more minutes. I'm going to give you 4 more minutes. So if you're done, you can go get a glass of water or something if you want. If you have any questions, just speak up.
I have a question.
Sure.
I was trying to group the dates, and I'm not sure if I'm getting exactly how you had it. Do you mind if
Can I
share my
stop
screen?
sharing and would you share? Is
Yeah.
that okay? Okay.
Sure. Okay. So originally what I had done, wait, how to do it.
Oh, okay. What you did, yes.
So when I guess when I had grouped it,
So right. So I would put in. You don't have starting at 21.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
That's why. Okay.
And do you want it? You can do it by months or years. You don't even like. I took my months off because I didn't care about the months.
Okay.
And see how that looks. Perfect.
Okay. Seems good.
Everybody else doing okay?
I missed the juicy part because I was disconnected by a thunderstorm.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
Lost, but don't.
The juicy
Don't
part
worry.
about the dates. Do you know how to
Well,
group? Do you know how to group by dates within a pivot table? That's the
Yes.
juicy part.
Yes, I know. But
Okay.
you added some. Yeah.
Go if you want to share your screen and we'll show you. You don't
I
have to.
think I'm quite late on the program now because I lost it for a couple of minutes. I don't want to.
Okay. No. That's okay.
Become
We have time.
Right. So let me share.
We're a team, Yuri.
Sorry.
We're a team here.
Yeah, but I'm not really good with Excel, so
That's okay.
hopefully I'm not the only one. Do you see my Excel?
I can.
All right. So, by the way, you're gonna learn French.
Okay. I took 6
So-
years of French, but
Really?
not good though.
It's a
Okay.
bonus to this
So
session.
I got the year to date. That's the basis for my first
First one
one, and the second one I think is here.
is
That
open.
was-
Open deduction. So I think, no, use the same one. So I think use a different, you need to use your open.
Oh, it was
Okay.
not the right. Okay, not the right sheet.
Correct.
Hold on. Let me flush this one. Open deductions. All right.
Yes, that
then
one.
Insert. Is it a dynamic?
Pivot, just a pivot table? I don't know. Oh yeah, so
There's
the
two
first
types.
one. I think it's the
First
first,
one.
I don't know. Try that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
And
I
then
like
just
that.
okay.
Yep.
Then you
Great.
pick
Type
type, reason with
or
What was it?
responsible department. And status.
okay.
Perfect. And then you can, the balance and the value. Right.
The value here.
Yes. And then make one of them is account and one of them is the dollar.
That makes sense.
Hmm?
Okay. And then
And now you want to drag the create date into the column. So I think create date is maybe that top second one. Drag that into, right. And, yours is, it's already grouped by date. So if you put your cursor on where it says 2019, any of those, yes, and right click, and go to group. And now starting at the top, type in March at the top, yep.
Mhm.
Type 3/1/2021. And let's get rid of the months and the quarters. We only want.
Should I select
I
this?
don't know if it matters. Yeah, leave it. See what happens. And I think unselect the months and the quarters. And now see what happens. Just the years.
I think you have to
Let's
refresh the data.
No, I don't think so. Do it again. Right click. Let me see. And go to group. Something.
Group.
Okay, so type in 3/1/2021 again. And let's see if it unselects it. Yeah. 3/1/2021. And do not check that box.
That's it?
Yes. There.
But still there's total number.
So what you can do is where your create date is over on your columns in your, drag the create date on top of the value. That doesn't look right, does it? Oh yeah, that's right. I have the count and the dollar amount. Yeah. The only thing, ours is different because we put our dollar on top, our first. So if you want to, again, go to your values and you can drag you don't have to drag, go down to the box, your value box. Yep, down there. And take the sum to balance to, put that on top. Now see what that looks like. And you can format that cell. Do you know how to format that? Go to any one of the numbers. If you put your cursor on a number, and right click. Maybe go to format number.
Yeah. Sorry, it was the other one.
Either one of them, format number. And then whatever you want, money,
Money.
Money.
All right.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Everybody done?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to share. Great. So it looks pretty much like this, hopefully. And let's see. Oh, we're kind of done. I'm going to show you I'm going to do a little VLOOKUP, and maybe I'm going to see if I can find. I'll just show you, tell you about tomorrow too. I'll show you the other. Okay. So again, this probably looks a little overwhelming, but the other file that you have will look like the dashboard that we looked at today, but it has a lot of colors. And this is almost like a little cheat sheet for you to use because the colors are telling you the source of the data. So when we look at it tomorrow, it's going to tell you, and this is filled out through April. We're completing it for the month of May. And so it tells you up here where it's yellow for the month new that these two are going to be part of, they're coming from year-to-date deductions. So you're going to use your year-to-date pivot table, but we're going to do it together tomorrow. And then this is going to be a calculation because it's green. And here, this salmon color, at least that's what it is on my monitor. These come from your open deductions. And so you'll see where you get the information from, what's going to calculate, and then how you're going to find the data. So tomorrow, that's what we're going to do. Anybody, any questions, anyone? We're going to go through that. It'll take us a while because there are a lot of different things. But then once you do it, then you will know how to create this dashboard, and we'll talk about some other variations that you can use as well. Anybody have any questions about anything that we've done today?
I think we Looks like we answered most of the questions that have come in so far. We do have one other question, which I think I understand this to interpret this to be downloading CSV files while using the Excel dashboard. So I interpret that as when you've got a pivot table in your dashboard and you want to double click on a cell to basically open up a new tab to show what's the data underneath that cell. Can you just show that real quick? I think that's one of the questions.
Okay. So let me see where I am. Okay. So if I'm in a pivot table, let me delete this one. Let's get a good one. Delete sheet. Okay. If I'm in a pivot table and I want to see, I see that I have, let's say, 17. I see that I have 17 returns. If I double click on this pivot, that just what I double clicked on, it will actually bring in the values of those 17 in a new sheet. So I don't know if that is someone's question.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Hopefully that was
and then I have that and I can delete it. The other thing that's very nice to know, if I have my data, let's say I have this is my year-to-date pivot table, and here's my year-to-date data. If I have my next month of data, I can kind of overlay that data on top. And then when I go to my pivot table, I can change the data source and just add the additional rows and refresh it, and then it will update my data. So I don't have to recreate it every time. Any other questions, Michelle, that you see there?
That looks like that. Do you want to just show how the refresh pivot table function works?
Sure. So if I'm here and it's right here, so I can refresh and say refresh all. So if I've changed anything on my underlying data, it will refresh it.
Great.
Anybody have anything else? Because if not, I'm going to talk about VLOOKUP.
Looks like we're good. Go for it.
Okay. So let me think about the best way to talk about VLOOKUP. Go over here. So I'm going to pretend that I have, okay, I'm going to pretend I'm going to do something nice. Like I'm not going to do it relevant to deductions because this already popped in my mind. I'm going to have someone's name, their birthday, their favorite color. And then let's say over here, and I'll just set it up first. Name, and then hair color, hair. Okay. So let's say I have someone whose name is Jane and her birthday's in October and her favorite color is blue. And then I have someone who's, sorry, Geraldine, it's there, and it's January and it's red. And then I have
bang on there.
Sharon, and I have, I don't know, June, and it's green. And I have, okay, this is my last one. A lot of people like blue. Okay. And meanwhile, over here, I have another sheet, which I'm going to put, and I'm going to put somebody else here too. I'm going to put, who didn't I do? Okay. So here, I don't know what color anybody's hair is. Okay. So let's say I have a file, correct, that has whatever information. So I could have used deductions. right? So I had the reason code and I could roll it up. But I have this, and now I have a whole separate file with different information, but there is something that links it, correct? The person's name. So what I want to do is I want to say, hey, I want you to go look. I want you to take the name Jane, go look in my other file, and if you can find the name Jane, bring back Jane's hair color. Right? So you get it? The concept? So it's really saying I'm trying to merge data. So it could be for this hair color, or in what I did, I looked at the reason code mapping. I had just the reason code, and I said, hey, if you have a reason code, come over here and give me the type. If you find that reason code, give me the category. If you find that reason code, give me the responsible department. So what you do is it's a VLOOKUP. So I'm going to just put hair color here. And I remember it, and I'll have to get my little cheat sheet, but I remember it in 3 parts. It's no, I'm going to put it separate. Sorry. I look at it is what should I match? What am I looking for? The second piece is where should I look? The third piece is if I find it, what field should I bring back? And then does it need to be an exact match? And all of these should have question marks. So this in my mind, and seriously, it sounds a little bizarre, but this is my mantra that I use every time I do VLOOKUP. I'm like, what am I looking for? Where do you want me to look for it? If I find it, which field in the table that you highlighted should I bring back? And does it need to be an exact match? Okay, so understanding that, and there's a comma after each one. So if I say VLOOKUP, so the first thing it says is, what's your lookup value? What am I looking for? Jane, I want you to look for Jane, comma. Now it says, what's your table array? Like when I first was learning, this is where I was like, okay, forget it. I don't even know what is it, table array, but it means where should I look for it? So it could be a different tab. It can be a different file. In my case, I want you to look here in these 2 columns, comma. So it's said, it placed, look at N and O, N to O. And now it says, if I find it, what field should I bring back? And if you look at this, you could say, oh, you want to bring back O, column O, but what you have to know in VLOOKUP is it doesn't use letters. It's like, you want me to bring the first column, the second column, the third, like what number column? Because it could be anywhere in your spreadsheet. And so for me, I'm saying, I want you to bring back the hair color. So I want you to bring back 2, the second column. So I'm going to say 2, comma. And then it says, if you say true, I'll give you an approximate match. And if you type false, it's an exact match. I don't know why it's true, false. I don't know. I just know false because I want an exact match. So let's see if it works. So it brought back red. And so now I can just copy this formula for the thousands of rows that I might have. Mm-hmm. And it shows me where it found it. It filled it in. Where it didn't find it, it says NA. So you can see Geraldine's not on this list and Karen's not on this list. And so it told me they couldn't find the data. Now let's say I decide Jane dyes her hair. So it's connected. So it'll remember that. I don't know what'll happen if I add Geraldine. I think it should work. Geraldine, what color's your hair?
Blonde.
Yeah, right. So that's VLOOKUP in a nutshell. I mean, there are some rules about it. Meaning, I'll show you a rule. If I had Geraldine in here twice, it just finds the first one. So you have to think about your data. If I have a one-to-many, it's going to be a problem. I have to find a one-to-one or understand that it's going to take the first one. But it's great if I'm working in Excel and I have a spreadsheet with my deduction information and I'm updating my notes, and then next week or next whenever I download a new spreadsheet with the open deductions, but it's got new ones and old ones. I can do a VLOOKUP based on like my claim number to pull it over, or maybe I have a deduction ID that I can use to bring that data over. So there's a lot that there's a ton that you can do with VLOOKUPs.
And don't you always have to have the item that you're matching and looking at in the first column of your two tables? That tricks a lot of people.
So that's right. Like, so there are three major things that you want to watch for. One is if I have multiple answers or multiple matches in where I'm pulling from, it's going to just look at the first one. The second one is, as Michelle said, you want your data that you're looking for. Like Jane could be anywhere, but what I'm matching for has to be in the first column of what I'm highlighting. So if hair color was first and I highlighted these two, it wouldn't work. So that field has to be in the first column. And the third one is often you do a whole nice, beautiful VLOOKUP and then it doesn't work and you just have the formula. So if this cell itself is formatted as like a text field or a custom field, sometimes it won't work, so that you just have to change the format. So again, really, to me, this is the beauty. What am I looking for? And I will share. I will go find it because I have to go find it. But I probably have a one-page PowerPoint that has this on it with the formula, because this is what you need to know. What am I looking for? Where should I get it? If I find it, what field? And then does it need to be an exact match? And I think that will really, really help.
This is a great way to explain and literally visualize how VLOOKUP works. It's probably the best I've ever seen, so I really appreciate it. Can you also address when you want to copy columns A through D onto a different document, how you got to do the basically paste special so you don't lose the value?
Oh, and first of all, well, I'll also say one of the things that I do is once I do a VLOOKUP, if I know that I'm not going to change my source, and then I will save this and paste values. You know what I mean? Like rather than, I'll show you, I'll just do this one, but I will, I do my control insert. I'm going to copy this and then I'm going to paste, it doesn't really matter, paste my value and right on top of itself. So now instead of the VLOOKUP, I've pasted the value, the answer. And the reason is if this is a separate file and I've done this whole analysis and now I go and send this file to somebody else, but I didn't send them this, these will all come in with NA. So if you are not changing this, then it's a good thing to, however you copy, and then paste and again, however you do that. If you know a shortcut or you don't, you can just do paste values and then right on top of itself. And now my VLOOKUP went away and I just have all of the answers.
Beautiful.
Ta-da!